like, it's kind of a shitty misnomer, honestly. I think, like, this idea that, um, these things that we're not supposed to talk about, or things that are hard to talk about, it, like, has kind of, like, the stigma attached to it that it's, like, a negative thing because you can't talk about it. And that's fucking bullshit. Because there's a lot of really, really amazing things that you cannot put into words, that you can't talk about.
Sometimes you can show people.
Sometimes you can show people, I guess, like through dance, a form of self-expression type of a thing that doesn't involve words, absolutely. But, I mean, as far as concepts are concerned, like, I think, or even philosophies, it's hard to put ideas into language sometimes, I think. And we kind of just write them off and lump them all into the category, I think, of something being, oh, well, it's not good, it's not valuable unless you can put it into words. And I think we should strive to put things into a language, and a language that everyone can understand. If it's an important enough idea, I think that it needs to be expressed in a number of forms, and that means that it needs to transcend dance, it needs to transcend a painting, it needs to transcend music. It has to be all of those things, I think. If it's worthwhile, it's imperative that it is expressed on all those levels in order to pass the idea on, because we don't have the same kind of not root memory, but our culture doesn't necessarily pass things down through verbiage anymore. There's not a story told about how we shouldn't eat red berries. You know what I mean? And I think that is sad. I don't know what stories that we do have about, not eating certain foods. I mean, for the most part, it seems to me that language, spoken and written, has been kind of hijacked in that regard. It's almost too vague at this point, because you have an argument and then you also have a counter argument, so it's very hard to find out what's true. It's like you say, oh, well, don't eat the red berries because they're by Monsanto, right? And you have an argument that says, oh, well, those are the good ones then, right? You know?
I mean, you have conflicting views on the internet.
Yeah, completely conflicting views. And so that almost neutralizes it completely and leaves you in a state of complete stasis.
Even people
and indecision.
Can spread that sort of mentality.
An individual can spread that mentality? What do you mean?
Through speech, things can be lost. People can say one thing and another person can say another.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, maybe there was more of a collective before when it had to do with people actually, like, being safe as far as, like, eating poisonous things or not.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe no one would make that up. They would just know it as
right, but the thing is, yeah, I mean, there are conflicting views and there are conflicting stories, and there's a lot of hypocrisy. I know that it's almost impossible to speak without contradicting yourself, it seems, And so it almost makes it difficult for anyone to trust you if we're under the idea that, oh, well, if you have a conflicting viewpoint and you attempt to express it and then you change your mind, well, then you're a liar. And that almost stunts people's growth and suppresses them from continuing to express themselves through dialogue, through verbiage. But there is no consequence if you eat the red berries and you die. You know what I'm saying? Because you're dead. But at the same time, there's no consequence for that kind of stuff anymore either, because you don't die. It's just more bullshit.
Why don't you die?
What do you mean, why don't you die? I think you do. I think you do die, but it's a spiritual death. It's not an actual death. You die a little bit more every time you believe a lie, every time you practice a lie, every time you perpetuate a lie, or do anything that is actually against yourself or the best interest of you, your survival, and the continuation of the species as a whole, you know? But I don't think that we necessarily die outright. You know, we have longer lifespans. As opposed to back then, when it was imperative that the truth be told. If you eat blank, this is the result. You know? You can't really argue that. It's not like it's the news. When a tribe was small enough, you would be aware that someone had died, someone had passed on. But now, there are so many people that it is very difficult to decipher what is true and what is false. And because of things like Photoshop, where it is possible to completely fabricate something and blur the lines of reality, it's difficult to know what is true and what isn't.
But do you think that means that people are more concerned with what's true and what's not, or do they just not care?
I don't think people care. I think people want to care. But it makes it difficult to care when you don't know what you're standing up for. When you can't actually express what it is that you believe in and have the facts to back it up. Because God only knows that if you were to cite this example or that example, how do you know that it wasn't fabricated? How do you know that it's 100% factual unless you were actually there? And even so, we are doubting each other, so it makes it extremely difficult to come together in that regard. It's just division and more division.
This is a simple example, but anytime I've had like hair extensions in, people are concerned with whether they're real or not, and if I tell them they're extensions, they're not real, they're like, oh,
right,
I thought they were real, and they just, it's like a negative thing. So it's like a quest for something, whether it's real or not, but the stakes aren't even high, because it's like, it doesn't matter what the answer is.
No, it doesn't, and yet they're asking something when the answer doesn't actually affect them in any way, except for how they've been taught that it should affect them. It's of no consequence whether or not your hair extensions are synthetic, are all natural, are real. That doesn't matter. So why ask? And
it's
I think
a common question I got.
Right.
And a common response.
And they're disappointed if you say no. And if you say, yes, they're real, then they're, oh, well, that's cool, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, oh, they're not real? Oh, well, they're cool anyway, but they're not as cool as they would. Right. But the thing is that maybe they're only asking that question because there is a problem with language, and they don't know how to actually just communicate with you on something that is actually important.
Yeah.
And that is thought of as being kind of a door opener to a conversation.
But then they just close the door right away anyway.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's giving them more credit than I would, but yeah.
I just think that there's a problem with language, and I think that we should really start to make an effort to fix it.